The glass hit the marble floor before she understood what she was hearing. Not the sound of it breaking. She'd heard that before, in the back kitchen of the restaurant, where she'd worked 3 nights a week through college, where things broke constantly and nobody flinched. This was different. This was the sound of something being thrown, deliberately, at a wall, 2 floors above her head. Nessa Crane stood very still in the doorway of the accounting office and listened to the silence that followed. Then a voice, low, unhurried, the kind of voice that didn't need to raise itself to be obeyed, said something she couldn't make out through the ceiling, and the silence got heavier. She looked down at the folder in her hands. Payroll discrepancy report. $47,000 missing across 6 subsidiary accounts over 11 months. She had found it at 11:43 the previous night, sitting alone in this same office under one fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped insect, eating a granola bar that had expired in March because she hadn't had time to go to the grocery store in 2 weeks. She had almost not reported it. That would have been smarter. She knew that now. 3 months earlier, Nessa had answered a job listing that described the position as Senior Accounts Analyst, Private Holdings Firm, competitive salary, discretion required. The discretion part should have told her something. She'd been working out of a sublet in Bridgeport, surviving on freelance bookkeeping for small businesses, a dry cleaner on Halsted, a dental office in Lincoln Square, a florist whose books were so tangled Nessa had spent 16 hours untangling them for $800, and a standing arrangement of white dahlias she'd had no room for in her apartment. She'd needed the job badly enough not to ask too many questions about what private holdings meant. The office was on the 14th floor of a building in the West Loop that had no signage in the lobby. The woman who interviewed her was named Renata. Wait, no, that name was from before. The woman who interviewed her was named Sylvie. Polished 50s, hair the color of dry concrete, reading glasses she didn't seem to need pushed up on her head. She had looked at Nessa's portfolio for exactly 4 minutes before sliding it back across the table and saying, "You found the Garfield accounts discrepancy in 20 minutes. Our last analyst missed it for 8 months. It was in the depreciation schedule," Nessa said. "People don't look there." Sylvie had almost smiled. "No, they don't." She was hired the same afternoon. She started the following Monday. Nobody explained to her what the company actually did, and she had been too practical to ask. She knew that some questions, once asked, couldn't be untangled from their answers. What she understood, piece by piece, over the first weeks. The firm was called Korath Group. It had 17 subsidiary holdings on paper, 4 of which appeared to generate actual revenue, the rest existing in a kind of accounting twilight she recognized from the dry cleaner on Halsted, whose brother-in-law had needed certain receipts to not quite add up. She understood ledgers. She understood the difference between what numbers said and what numbers meant. The Korath Group's numbers said one thing very clearly. Someone in this building had been skimming. She found it on a Tuesday night in October. She reported it Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, she was sitting outside an office on the 16th floor, a floor she had not previously been authorized to access, holding the same folder and listening to the sound of her own heartbeat. The door opened. The man who appeared in it was not what she'd expected, though she couldn't have said exactly what she'd expected. He was tall in the way that took up space without trying. Dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open. His hair was dark and starting to show grey at the temples in a way that looked less like aging and more like erosion, like something that had been worn down by a long time of being itself. There was a scar along his jaw, pale and old, a thin line that ran from the corner of his mouth toward his ear. He looked at her the way people look at things they're deciding the value of. "You're the one who found it," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," she said anyway. "Come in." His name was Korath. Just Korath. No first name offered. None volunteered, and she understood immediately that this was intentional. The office was large and almost empty in the way that only expensive spaces could be empty. Everything in it chosen rather than accumulated. He sat behind a desk that held a laptop, a glass of water, and nothing else. He did not offer her a seat. She took one anyway, because her legs had decided they were done standing. He opened her folder. He read it the way she'd learned to read a balance sheet. Not linearly, but in shapes, looking for the pattern before the detail. She watched his eyes move and recognized the motion. This man understood numbers. That surprised her more than the scar, more than the office, more than the glass that someone had thrown through a wall on the floor above. 47,000, he said. $47,212, she said. Across 6 accounts. The disbursements were structured to stay under the automatic audit threshold each time. Whoever did it knew the system. They did, Korath said. He closed the folder. His name is Whitfield. He's been with us for 9 years. Nessa said nothing. You could have buried this, Korath said. He wasn't accusing. He was noting. The way it was hidden, most people would have missed it. The few who found it might have decided not to see it. I don't work that way, she said. Why not? She thought about the dry cleaner on Halstead, about signing her name to books that said things she knew weren't true, about the specific feeling of compromise, which she'd learned at 24 was not dramatic and cinematic the way they showed in movies. It was small and quiet, and it got into you slowly, the way cold got into a house through a door, left open a crack. Because I've done it before, she said, and I didn't like what it cost me. Korath looked at her for a long moment. Whitfield has friends, he said. People in this building who owe him things. By telling me what you found, you've made yourself a problem for those people. I figured, she said. Does that concern you? She was 29 years old. She had $3,400 in a checking account and a sublet she paid for month to month. She had one person she would call in an emergency, her college roommate Petra. No, that name was taken. Her college roommate Bex, who lived in Portland now and would absolutely answer the phone but couldn't actually do anything. She had a coat that was fine for Chicago in October, but not for Chicago in January, and she hadn't figured out the January problem yet. Yes, she said honestly, but I still reported it. Something shifted in Korath's face. Not warmth exactly, more like the recognition of something he hadn't expected to find. Go back to your office, he said. Lock your door. Don't discuss this with anyone. Whitfield, she said. What happens to him? That, Korath said, is not your department. She went back to her office. She locked the door. She sat at her desk and opened a new spreadsheet and stared at it for 20 minutes without typing a single number. Whitfield was gone by Friday. His office on the 12th floor had been emptied over a single night, the way hotel rooms get emptied, efficiently, without trace, as if occupancy had simply ended. Nobody talked about it. She was learning, how things ended at the Korath Group. Not with noise, but with absence. What she had not anticipated was that the ending of Whitfield would not end her problem. She understood it on Monday, when she came back from lunch and found her computer locked out of 3 systems she'd had access to that morning. By Tuesday, the other analysts in her department, 2 women who'd been carefully pleasant to her since she arrived, had stopped meeting her eyes in the hallway. On Wednesday, Sylvie called her into a conference room and said, very neutrally, that some concerns had been raised about her team integration. What concerns? Nessa asked. That you may not be a good fit, Sylvie said. There it was. Whitfield's friends, making themselves known. She walked out of the conference room and took the elevator to the 16th floor. She had not been invited. There was a man outside Korath's office, broad, watchful, the kind of stillness that came from training, who looked at her the way security looked at things they were deciding to stop. I need 5 minutes, she said. He's not available. I found $47,000 that nobody else found, she said. I think I've earned 5 minutes. The man studied her for a moment. Then he reached for the intercom. Korath saw her. 5 minutes that became 15. She laid it out the way she laid out any discrepancy, plainly, without drama, with evidence, the locked accounts, the changed behavior, Sylvie's meeting, what she understood it to mean. They're going to push me out, she said. Yes, Korath said. That seems like a problem, given that I know what I know. It is, he said. So what do you do with people who know things they shouldn't, and are about to become unemployed and unhappy about it? She said it without entirely meaning to. It landed in the room and she felt, briefly, that she had miscalculated badly. Korath looked at her for a long moment with that assessing stillness, and she held herself very straight and didn't take it back. "That depends," he said, "on the person, on whether they're a liability or an asset," she said. "Yes, I'm an asset," she said. "You had a 9-year employee stealing from you in a way no one caught for nearly a year. I found it in 3 months. I'm the best forensic accountant in this building, and Whitfield's friends are trying to remove me because I'm a threat to whatever else they're doing that I haven't found yet." She paused. "Which means there's more to find." The silence in the room was the kind that had weight. "There is," Korath said. "Let me find it." "In exchange for what?" "Job security," she said. "A real contract. And a title that reflects what I'm actually doing, because right now I'm listed as Senior Accounts Analyst, and what I'm actually doing is forensic investigation of your organization's financial integrity, which is a very different thing." Korath was quiet for a moment. Outside the windows, the city arranged itself in its usual indifferent geometry, glass and steel and sky. "You negotiate like someone who's done it before," he said. "I've been doing it since I was 16. She said. "When you grow up without money, you learn early that the only leverage you have is knowing your own value, because nobody else is going to tell you what it is." He looked at her for a long time. "Sit down, Miss Crane," he said. She sat. "I'll need you to understand some things about the nature of this organization before we continue." "I already understand more than you probably want me to," she said. "I've been reading your books for 3 months. Reading numbers," he said, "is not the same as understanding what they mean. Then explain the gap." And he did. What Korath told her took 40 minutes and changed the shape of everything she thought she'd known for the past 3 months. The Korath Group was not a private holdings firm the way a dentist's office was a medical practice. It was a management structure for a network of operations that existed at the edge of legality, some beyond it, in a way that was old and established, and had its own economy, its own code, its own version of order. He told her this plainly, without apology, the way someone states geography. "Here is where we are. Here is what surrounds us." She did not panic. She was aware distantly that she probably should have panicked. Instead, she felt something she recognized from the nights she'd stayed late in the accounting office of the dry cleaner on Halstead, looking at books that told complicated stories, a kind of cold clarity, the feeling of understanding the actual shape of a thing. "You're telling me this," she said, "because you've already decided I'm staying." "I'm telling you this," Korath said, "because you've already figured out enough that not telling you would be dishonest. You're a criminal organization that values honesty." "We value precision," he said. "Honesty is a component of precision, and you need someone who's precise with numbers." "I need someone who's precise with numbers and cannot be bought or pressured by the people currently trying to buy and pressure them," he said. "Those qualifications are rarer than you might think." She looked at him, the scar along his jaw, the careful stillness, the way he'd read her report like he already knew how to read it. She thought about the granola bar that had expired in March, the coat that wouldn't last January, the $3,400. "What's the contract?" she said. 1 year, he said. "At the end of it, we reassess." "What do I get?" He named a number. She kept her face very still. It was 4 times her previous salary. "And if I find something that implicates people higher up than Whitfield?" she asked. "You report it to me," he said, "directly. No one else, and you handle it, and I handle it, the way you handled Whitfield." "Yes," she thought about that. "I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what that means," she said. "No," he said, "you're not. That's part of the arrangement." She looked at the city through his window. She thought about what precision meant. About the difference between knowing the numbers and knowing what the numbers meant. About the difference between understanding a ledger and understanding the operation the ledger described. She thought about Whitfield, about his 9 years, about his friends who were still in this building, doing things she hadn't found yet. "Okay," she said. "Okay," Korath said, as if she'd confirmed something he'd already written down. The first 3 weeks under the new arrangement were strange in a way she couldn't easily describe to herself. She had a new office, not on the 14th floor with the other analysts, but on the 15th, alone, with a door that locked from the inside and access codes that were different from everyone else's. She had 3 monitors and software she'd never seen in any corporate environment, and a direct line to Korath's assistant, a composed young man named Theo, who answered in 2 rings at any hour. Whitfield's friends tried twice more to make her life uncomfortable. Both times, something happened that made the discomfort stop. She didn't ask what. She understood by now what Korath meant when he said he handled things. What she hadn't understood, hadn't accounted for, was the man himself. She had expected him to be absent. A signature on a contract, a voice through a phone, a name on the organizational chart she was quietly redrawing. That was how it worked in any legitimate firm. You dealt with middle management. You escalated only in crisis. The person at the top existed in theory. Korath was not absent. He appeared in her office on a Tuesday afternoon without announcement, looked at the 3 monitors, and said, "Show me what you've found." She showed him. He asked questions that told her he already understood what she was showing him. Not the surface of it, but the structure. The way the numbers nested inside each other. The place where the logic folded. She caught herself explaining something and stopping because he'd already arrived at the conclusion. "You've done this before," she said. "Not the accounting. But you've read books like this." "I built the system," he said simply. "Then you know where the holes are." "I know where I put the holes," he said. "I don't know where others found them." She nodded. That made sense. She understood this from tax law, from the way regulations created their own shadows, the gap between intent and exploitation. "Someone else has been using the same disbursement structure as Whitfield," she said, "in a different set of accounts. They're better. They've been at it longer and they know the audit cycle. But they make the same small mistake, which tells me they learned from the same source." Korath was very still. "Show me," he said. She showed him. His face did not change, but something behind it did, a tightening, a recalibration. She watched it happen and thought about fault lines, the way geological stress was invisible until it suddenly wasn't. "His name," she said carefully, "appears in the access logs twice. I can show you the timestamps." "Don't," Korath said. "Not yet. Document it separately. Keep a copy off-site." "Off-site," she said. "You mean not in this building. I mean not accessible to anyone in this organization. Including me." She looked at him. "Including you," she said. "If you're going to be the only person who can verify this independently," he said, "then you need to be the only person who holds it." She sat with that for a moment. What it meant. The trust it implied, not personal trust, not yet, but operational trust, the kind that said, "I need this to be clean, and clean means out of my hands." "Okay," she said. "I mean it, Miss Crane. If something happens to me—" "I understood you the first time," she said. He looked at her. There was something in the look that wasn't quite what she expected from him. Not the assessment, not the calculation. Something else, something that looked, briefly, like relief. "Good," he said, and left. She found 4 more anomalies over the next 6 weeks. Each time, she documented it the way he'd asked. Cleanly, separately, with copies held somewhere that was hers alone. Each time she brought it to him, she understood a little more about the shape of the thing she was inside. The way you understood a building by walking its hallways rather than reading the blueprint. She also understood gradually that the person behind the second layer of theft was someone Korath trusted, had trusted specifically for a long time. She could see it in the organizational structure, in the access levels, the account privileges, the length of tenure. She didn't say this out loud. She documented it and waited. She also understood gradually that she had stopped thinking of Korath as a name on a contract. She wasn't sure when it happened. It wasn't dramatic. It was the accumulation of Tuesdays, of him appearing in her office, of conversations that started in numbers and moved, slowly, into something else. She learned that he didn't eat lunch, that he thought about problems by being still in a way that looked like absence but wasn't, that he had read things she hadn't expected a man like this to have read, that his silences were never empty. She learned the scar was from something he didn't discuss and she didn't ask about. She learned that he noticed things. The expired granola bar on her desk one afternoon. He said nothing, but the next morning there was a bag from the restaurant 3 blocks away on her desk when she arrived, and it happened again the following week, and it kept happening, and she never mentioned it because mentioning it would require deciding what it meant. She was not good at things that required deciding what they meant. She was good at numbers, which had fixed values. People did not have fixed values. On a Wednesday in December, 6 weeks into the arrangement, she was working late, which was normal, and she heard footsteps in the hallway, which was not. The 15th floor was hers alone after 7. She'd confirmed this. She reached for her phone. Before she could unlock it, her office door opened. The man in the doorway was not Korath. He was one of Whitfield's remaining friends. She'd seen him in the elevator twice, a man in his late 40s with the look of someone who'd been passed over for things he thought he deserved. His name was Greer. She'd found his access in her documents 2 weeks ago and documented it without saying anything, waiting for the right moment. The right moment had apparently not been soon enough. "You're in someone else's office," she said. Her voice came out steady. She was distantly impressed by this. "You've been compiling a report," Greer said. "I compile reports professionally," she said. "It's the job. Not on me. I don't know what you're referring to," she said, and reached slowly for the mouse to close the screen she was working on. "Don't," he said. She stopped. The door behind him opened. Korath walked in. He looked at Greer the way he'd looked at her report that first day, taking in the shape of it, the structure. Then he looked at Nessa, and something moved behind his eyes that she couldn't name. "Go home, Miss Crane," he said. "I'm not finished, Nessa." It was the first time he'd used her first name. It landed differently than she expected. "Go home." She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. She had to pass within 2 feet of Greer to reach it, and she did this without looking at him, which required a specific quality of deliberateness that she felt in her teeth. In the hallway, she waited for the elevator. She could hear, faintly, Korath speaking on the other side of the door. The voice was very calm, the kind of calm that had weight behind it. She did not ask what happened to Greer. She had stopped asking those questions. January came. Her coat turned out to be fine. She didn't know how, but she'd bought it second-hand from a vintage store in Wicker Park, and maybe whoever had owned it before had done something to it, some specific kind of waterproofing, because it turned out to be perfectly sufficient for Chicago in January, which was either luck or someone else's foresight keeping her warm. She thought about that sometimes. Someone else's foresight. On the last day of January, she found the final piece. She'd been tracking a series of transfers through a shell entity she'd identified in week 4, a company that existed on paper in Delaware and generated no actual revenue but received regular disbursements from 3 of the Korath Group's most active accounts. She'd been building the chain slowly, carefully, because she understood that what she was finding would not be simple to handle. The name attached to the Delaware entity appeared at the end of a long string of documentation, a signature on a founding document filed 11 years ago and never updated because nobody had thought to look. She sat very still for a long time. Then she called Theo. "I need to see him," she said. "Tonight. It can't wait," Theo said. "I'll ask." The answer came back in 7 minutes. 16th floor, now. She brought her laptop. She brought the off-site documentation she'd kept in a folder on a cloud account that had nothing to do with the Korath Group's systems. She brought the granola bar she'd put in her bag that morning out of habit, even though she hadn't been eating them as much, because there was usually food on her desk from the restaurant 3 blocks away. Korath was at his desk. He looked at her face when she came in, and he straightened very slightly. A small, specific motion that she'd learned meant he was preparing for something. She turned the laptop around and showed him. The name on the Delaware filing, 11 years. The amount, in total, once she'd traced every thread, $312,000, moved so slowly and so carefully that it had never triggered a single automated alert. Brannick, he said. The name meant something to him. She could see that clearly. 12 years with the organization, she said. Senior enough to know every audit mechanism. Personal enough to you that nobody would have looked. Korath said nothing. He was looking at the screen the way she'd seen him look at her first report, but this was different. This wasn't calculation. This was something older and heavier. I kept the documentation off-site, she said. The way you asked. Yes, everything is time-stamped and verified. It would hold up to, well, whatever kind of review this requires. Yes, I'm sorry, she said. And she was, not the performance of it, but the actual thing, because she could see what this cost him, and she understood somewhere she didn't usually let herself understand things about people, that this particular loss was not about money. Korath was quiet for a long time. Then he said, how much of this could be explained away? Misclassification, accounting error, plausible deniability. She looked at him. I'm not asking you to bury it, he said. I'm asking how clean it is. It's very clean, she said. There's no explanation that works. I looked. Okay, he said. She waited. Your year is almost up, he said. She blinked. She had in fact forgotten. The contract she'd signed, 1 year, reassess, had been so thoroughly absorbed into her daily reality that she had stopped perceiving it as temporary. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, he agreed. The room was quiet. Outside, Chicago in January made its usual sounds. A distant siren, the wind off the lake that was impossible to fully shut out even on the 16th floor. I want to extend it, he said. She looked at him. The contract, he said. I want to extend it, indefinitely, with revised terms. What terms? The salary stays the same. You move up to the 16th floor, the office that's been empty since March. Full access, direct report to me. That's a significant change in scope, she said. Yes, and in exposure, she said. The more I know, the more I'm... You've been inside this organization for 9 months, he said. You know where the money comes from. You know what Whitfield did, and what Brannick did, and what the Delaware Shell Company is, and what $312,000 means in the context of what I run. You are already at maximum exposure, Miss Crane. He paused. Nessa. Again, her first name. The same thing happened that had happened in the hallway in December, a small recalibration of some internal instrument she hadn't known she was carrying. So the offer isn't about increasing my risk, she said carefully. You're saying I'm already committed. I'm saying you've been committed since October, he said. I'm asking if you want the title to reflect it. She thought about the sublet in Bridgeport, the month-to-month lease, the coat that had turned out to be fine, the granola bars that had been replaced, gradually, by something else. She thought about Tuesdays, about conversations that started in numbers and didn't stay there. She thought about what precision meant, the difference between knowing the value of something and understanding it. You said the contract would be indefinite, she said. Yes, that's a different word than the one you used in September. He looked at her. In September, he said, I didn't know what I was hiring, and now you do. Now I do, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. She was good at holding her face still. She'd learned it young, in situations where showing what you felt meant giving something away. But she understood in this moment that something had already been given and that the question was whether to acknowledge it. I want one more condition, she said. Name it. The food from the restaurant, she said. Stop, or make it official. Because right now it exists in this middle space where I can't decide what it is, and I don't function well in middle spaces. The room was very quiet. Korath looked at her for a long time. Make it official, he said. It came out quieter than his other words, more deliberate, as if he'd measured the weight of each one before setting it down. She nodded. She looked at her laptop screen, at the name that had cost him something real, at the $312,000 that she'd traced like a thread through a maze for 9 months. I'll need the new contract in writing, she said. Theo will have it by morning, he said. And Brannick, I'll handle it. Okay, she said. She closed the laptop. She looked out the window at the city that had been refusing to warm up since November. The coat I bought in October turned out to be sufficient for January. Korath looked at her. I thought you should know, she said, since I mentioned it in September. As a concern. I remember, he said. I wasn't expecting it to work out. Most things, he said, don't work out for reasons that have nothing to do with the original plan. She thought about that. That sounds like something that applies to more than coats, she said. It does, he said. She picked up her bag. She stood. She was almost to the door when he said her name, her first name, again, the third time, and she was starting to understand that he used it specifically and intentionally, that it meant something when he chose it over the formal address. She turned. He was looking at her with that expression she'd catalogued in December and hadn't been able to name. She could name it now. It was the look of someone who had been keeping their own books for a very long time and had just found, in an unexpected column, an entry they hadn't known to include. The Brannick documentation, he said. The off-site copy, yes. Keep it, he said. Don't delete it. Even after this is resolved. She understood what he was saying. Not resolved for the organization, resolved between the two of them. Keep it even after you trust me. Keep it because trust and verification are not opposites. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She went home in the January cold that was manageable. She had decided, because some problems solved themselves in the living of them. Not through planning, not through the careful balancing of a ledger, but through showing up consistently in the same column until the numbers started to mean something new. She was not afraid of what came next. She was, for the first time in a long time, curious about it. That was enough.